In this video, we'll learn how MARI implements a layer-based workflow for painting textures. Alright, so at this point you'll want to go ahead and open up the Assassin Final MARI archive. You can find that in the project files for this course under the MARI files folder. You'll want to go ahead and tap this Open Archive button, load that guy up, and then we'll be able to continue on if you want to follow along with me. Alright, great. So MARI is a layer-based painting application. Now this layer-based workflow, or this idea of a layer-based approach, is something that really is bigger than just MARI. There's many 2D and 3D applications that implement some type of a layer-based approach. MARI is very similar to programs like Photoshop. If you've ever used Photoshop, you've used a layer-based application. Now, MARI's implementation of layers is a bit different than Photoshop's, but it's the same general premise. We're going to stack layers one on top of another, and then we're going to read them from the top down. Let's go ahead and jump over here to the Channels palette for our Assassin project, and I want to come in here and show you that there's a little hamburger icon to the right of each one of these channels. Now, every time you create a channel inside of MARI, it comes with a layer stack. So that's what these little hamburger icons indicate. As a matter of fact, you can click on one, say this AO hamburger stack here, and you can see that another palette opens up, and it has a layer stack inside of it. This particular layer stack only has two layers. It has this base layer, and then it has this layer entitled Layer above that. Now, every time you create a channel, it includes a base layer. This base layer is going to have the default fill color for the channel placed upon it. So more than likely, if you took all the defaults, it's going to fill this with a 50% gray. You can actually come in here and take this palette, dock it anywhere you want, or you can pin it down so it doesn't disappear on you. Notice that if you don't pin it down, it will disappear as soon as you mouse away from it. All right. So you can access the layer stacks over here, but there's also a layers palette that comes as part of the default palette layout for MARI. Mine's right over here. Notice I have my diffuse channels selected. If I come over here and look at this layer stack, you'll see here that I'm looking at the layer stack for the diffuse channel. Now, if we change the channel we have selected, this particular palette's contents will change accordingly. Let me show you this keyboard shortcut here. It's I, and that will bring up your channel pop-up. So inside the channel pop-up, we have four columns, one for objects, shaders, channels, and layers. Now we can select whichever object we want to work on inside of our project. We can select how we want to view that object, whether through a shader, or we just want to view maybe the contents of a current channel or a current layer. Now we can also select a channel. Here's where I'm going to change the channel. Let's select that AO channel. And notice over here that changes, as well as the description up here in the top. Let me go ahead and select back over to the diffuse. Now you will see here there are a number of different layers inside of here. Now this doesn't show all of the layers contained in this layer stack, because some of these are actually groups, and it does not expose the contents of a group. Let's go ahead and jump back over here to the diffuse layers and start exploring this. Now, when you're working in MARI, you should understand that there are four different types of layers, basic types of layers. That's not including groups, of course. The first and probably most important for you to understand is a paint layer. A paint layer is a layer that you can create, very similar to this one here, that you can actually take a tool like the paintbrush and paint pixel data onto. So this is something that would be reminiscent of painting in 2D space in Photoshop. We have other types of layers. We're going to get into those in the next few videos. But let's go ahead and take, for example, this explosives_dirt layer. And let's zoom in on kind of where that is on our mesh here. It's going to be something that's on her belt here. It's going to take me just a moment to get zoomed in on that. And we'll let MARI process that. In case you haven't noticed, this particular project is very large. And the larger your project gets in terms of mesh size as well as texture size, the more of your system resources that it does take up. So you can see here that these little explosives have some dirt that's painted on them. If we wanted to take this layer and rename it, for example, I could come over here and just simply double click on that name, and MARI would allow me to rename that layer. Now, if we wanted, we could just tap escape, and then we can say, maybe we want to hide the contents of this layer just temporarily. We could come over and click on this little eyeball and hide the dirt that is on the explosives. Now, it'll take MARI just a moment to catch up to me here. And we'll just take a look. And there we go. Now the dirt that I've painted in there has disappeared. All right, great. Now, if we wanted to, say, move this layer around, again, MARI is reading this layer stack from the top down. Maybe there was some wood texture on these explosives as well, but this wood layer right here is on top of this dirt layer. Well, we could easily take this layer and just click it and drag it up and move it to the top of our layer stack if we wanted to. And it would now appear on top of whatever wood that we had assigned to this geometry as well. So this is a pretty standard workflow when it comes to painting, using a layer-based approach like this. Now, let's talk a little bit more. Maybe we want to duplicate this dirt. We want it to be darker. We're just going to create a copy of this layer so there's two of them. We could just right-click on that, choose Copy, and then Paste, and that would give us basically a duplicate of that explosives dirt layer. Now we can select multiple layers here by holding down the Shift key. Maybe we wanted to take these 4 layers and just merge them together. We can select them all, come over here, and choose to merge the layers. So there's a lot of functionality here, and I'm not going to dive into each and everything you can do inside of a layer stack. There's just too much information to cover. But I do want to kind of run through a short list of things to show you here. Sometimes with rather large layer stacks, it can be helpful to add sort of a color tag to those. You can do that right over here. You can add these little colors, maybe this yellow color. And you can see here that this color swatch appears here. Now there are some other icons here. This icon is telling me what type of layer it is. The paint palette indicates that the layer I have selected is a paint layer. The icon to the right of that you see down here is actually a mask. We'll talk about masks in just a little bit, but kind of moving over here, you'll notice there is a padlock icon. We can lock the contents of a layer so that we can't paint on that layer or remove anything that's on that layer. We could just simply come over, click that little padlock, and MARI will lock that layer for us. It'll prevent us from making any changes to a locked layer. And what you should see here is that little padlock, once MARI finishes processing that request, it's going to close, and it's going to look sort of like this padlock right down here. There you go. You can see we've locked that particular layer. Now, we do have some options up here at the very top of this particular palette. You'll notice that they all got grayed out when I locked the layer, but this little slider right here is going to be an opacity slider, so we could come in and we can dial the opacity of the contents of a layer down or up. This right here is going to be a blend mode, very similar to applications like Photoshop. We could come in and assign a different blend mode if we wanted to create a little different reaction between this layer and the layers below it. Now you'll notice here there are a tremendous amount of blend modes, and quite a few of these probably you're not familiar with, and they don't show up in applications like Photoshop. But we also have some filtering abilities. This is a rather large layer stack. You can see that each one of these groups has a lot of layers in it. Now we could come over here and we could filter by a number of different items. We could come in here, filter by name, by type, by attribute, or by color tag. Now, if we wanted to, I could just say, show me all the layers with the name skin. And you can see I have one layer group called skin. Pretty cut and dry. Nice little feature here, built right into the layers palette. All right, great. Now, the last thing I want to show you here is really kind of an extension of locking a layer. We looked at that. Now you'll notice that there's a color out to the right of all of these layers. If I were to come over here, dial these down, you'll notice some of them are red, some of them are blue. Let's go ahead and expand skin, and you'll see there's actually some more colors inside here. So these colors indicate or a warning to you, if you will, of how much of your system resources a particular layer or group of layers is taking up. Green layers are very light. They're quick to process. They're not very heavy at all. MARI can work with those very efficiently. Red indicates that a layer is very heavy. It's taking up a lot of your system resources. Now, sometimes when you have a particular project that maybe it's a really high-resolution mesh and you've got a lot of high-resolution textures on it, you'll start to notice that MARI gets a little bit encumbered by this. It's totally natural. It's processing a lot of data. You can alleviate that by doing this up here. You'll notice this blue color next to these 3 layer groups. These layer groups have been cached, which means MARI has taken them out of memory and written them to disk. Now, a cache layer is one, all the data on it is safe, all the textures on it are safe, but we can't change any of that when the layer is cached, very similar to when a layer is locked. As a matter of fact, you'll notice here that the padlock is closed for those particular layers. Let's say we wanted to cache this explosives dirt layer. We could just simply right-click on that, come down to caching, and just choose to cache the layers. Now, we could cache only the selected layer. We could cache layers up to here, and then there's an uncache layers option. I'm going to go ahead and cache that layer, and you'll notice down here inside of the status bar, MARI's giving us a status of its progress in processing that particular request. For this single layer, it's actually going to happen pretty quickly here. And you can see the color turns blue and the padlock closes. So this is what the process of caching layers here inside of a layer stack looks like. All right, great. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next video, and we're going to stay inside of layer stacks here. In the next video, we'll learn about layer masks and layer mask groups.